Hello, I'm Seth Stewart of Miami University's Alumni Association, and thank you for joining us for this panel sponsored by the Alumni Association and our campus partners. Today's discussion will feature five of the eight Miami University Black student body presidents. Thank you to those who submitted questions ahead of time, and we want your participation live. Feel free to ask questions and using the Ask Question button below the video, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. First, we have John Cager, who is the pastor of the 630-member Ward African Methodist Episcopal Church in Los Angeles, and he was Miami's first elected student body president. Next, we have Randi Thomas, who is the inaugural vice president of Aspire, an office for advancing strategic partnerships, institutional relations, and economy at Miami University. And he's Miami's second elected Black student body president. Next, we have Brian Alexander. He's the senior associate director of external relations for New Leaders Org, and he's Miami's fifth elected student body president. Jaylen Perkins is an addiction navigator at Bond Secures Health, Mercy Health, and is studying for a master's degree in public health at Cornell University. And he's Miami's sixth elected Black student body president. And we have Jannie Kamara, who is a senior studying diversity, leadership, and Black world studies, and the first Black woman to be elected student body president in Miami's history. And Jannie, thank you for joining us to moderate this wonderful panel, and I'll turn over to you to start the discussion.
Thank you for having me, Seth, and I'm super excited to be here and with all of our speakers today. You all are so inspirational for me, and especially when I'm in this role right now. And so let's get started. You all have made significant impacts on this campus during your time at Miami. So what motivated you all to run for the position of student body president? I will start off with John.
Well, for me, it started in 1984. I was a member of the College Democrats, and myself and another female ended up being elected delegates to the Democratic National Convention in 1984 because Gary Hart won Butler County. What that showed me was that I could aspire to elected leadership. Second thing that happened in fall of 1984, we had a sister from the Pan-African Congress come and visit the Miami campus, talking about how we as students could make change to the apartheid system in South Africa by getting our university to divest. A group of Black students went to the Board of Trustees, asked the Board of Trustees to divest from South Africa, and we were completely disrespected, disregarded, and marginalized, and that got me ticked off and made me decide to run for ASG president.
Randi, you're muted.
So I had the good fortune of being an undergraduate when John Cager was student body president. So I got to watch him work and see how he did things. He was kind enough to include me on his campaign staff as well as his staff when he won. And so I really learned a lot from him, Don Emerson and Mark Cannon, and was able to carry the mantle on 2 years later after his presidency. So a number of the things that you'll hear him talk about that he started, I was in the good position to kind of see them through and have them be successful. So, but we would not have had the success in my term, but for John's leadership and his getting things started. So I really saw firsthand from him how you could be engaged and how you could make a change on campus. And that inspired me to run for student body president.
And for me, I first joined ASG as a communications major. Doing web design and graphic design was something that was always a passion of mine and an interest that I had done in high school. And so I joined to sort of help ASG at the time update its website and the earliest versions of its social media in the mid 2000s. And then that eventually evolved for me, just kind of wanting to take a leap of faith into a higher leadership role to challenge myself and go outside my comfort zone and to try to help ASG be more effective and to have a really strong impact on campus.
Similar to Brian, it was a little bit of a leap of faith running for student body president because I had no former experience in ASG. However, I felt like I had a role and obligation in a sense to, represent and advocate for our students, specifically those that, did not have a voice for themselves in administration and things like that. So throughout my years, I was an RA, president of the Black Student Action Association, participated with the Government Relations Network with Randi, and advocating on behalf of higher education. So, touched a lot of different areas. But what ultimately pushed me was my involvement with the Black Action Movement, which we'll talk about later. But ultimately, that first engagement with upper administration and, their willingness to, work with students is what ultimately pushed me to pursue more and run for student body president.
Yeah, so there are a lot of themes that I see here of just leadership, mentorship, and just involvement on campus. And so going into my next question, and this question goes out to John, Black representation in student leadership positions at Miami has been something that the Black community has strived to increase throughout our time and presence on this campus. Did you know at the time of your election the weight of your impact as the first elected Black student body president at Miami?
Absolutely not. I was 21 years old. I was concerned about the young lady who I was dating who went to college in Tennessee. I may or may not have been concerned about people I was hollering at the Miami campus. And so it did not hit me as being something iconic. However, a week after I got elected, I had a history prof who was Palestinian, who pulled me aside and told me how he was proud that, a person of color got it. I was looking for an apartment to live in over the summer because I had to go to summer school. Ended up renting from a Black couple who basically rented to me because they were proud that a Black man had gotten this position. I had some brothers and sisters on campus who I didn't think I was cool with, who all of a sudden became very cool with me because I got elected. And I was like, whoa, maybe this means more than I think it means. And, looking back, I realized that we actually started, something. To think that there would be 8, ASG presidents in the last 30 years after, one in the 30 before then, that means something.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that here in 2020, it's seen and it's valued. And we now have 2 back-to-back Black student body presidents. And so your impact has been amazing on this campus. My next question goes to Randi. So first, congratulations on your position as the Vice President of Aspire. I and the rest of the community value your work and dedication to increasing and maintaining Miami's relationship with our campus partners. So John ran for student body president 2 years prior to your run. Why did you decide to help John with his campaign? And could you share what it was like witnessing the historic election of Miami's first Black student body president?
It really, John's very modest, but it meant a lot to all of us that John was elected president. I had the good fortune of serving as the vice president for finance, we called it back then, which was an all-elected position. So we had folks that were very engaged in student government, Black students, that is, when we were here. Black students were engaged in just about everything when we were here. And John and his team really built a foundation and really instilled in those of us that were younger than them the fact that we had to pick up where they left off if we ever were going to get something accomplished, because obviously as students, for the most part, we're serving in a 1-year term and things of that nature. And so we were able to do that from the start of John and Don Emerson and Mark Cannons, and there were others, but those were the 3 that I worked with the most. I believe we had a run of 6 or 7 consecutive student body presidents that kind of is almost like a coaching tree. You know how Miami's the cradle of coaches and you have a coach and then they have assistant coaches. Well, that's what John started and things of that nature. And so we may have skipped some years, but I hope in my tenure here as an administrator, a staff member and an administrator, that I may have helped inspire some students, Black students and white students, males and females, to seek the higher office of ASG. So I really do owe a lot to President Cager, as I still like to call him. So.
Oh, that's so sweet. I think that's adorable that you both had such a strong relationship, even years later, decades later. And Randy, you touched a bit on your impact currently at Miami's campus. And you offer such a unique perspective in this conversation because you've stayed involved in the Miami community for so long. And so how have you seen this campus grow and develop into electing Miami's back-to-back two Black student body presidents?
Well, it's somewhat counterintuitive, right? Because while I celebrate the fact that you all are back to back, it's not unique, right? That's the way it should be. You two were the best qualified, in my humble opinion. Your colleagues were very good that you ran against, but you two ran the best campaign and did all the things that you needed to do, and it was, as they would say in the legal profession, a no-brainer. So I'm happy that we're at that point. And also I might mention that during your all's term, Jermaine was elected homecoming king as well. So again, I think that shows the kind of change over time, that's taken place at Miami, with the sense of if you're good and you're the best, and then people will recognize that. So I think it's important that they still recognize that we're Black folks, because that's important, right? But it's not that we're being elected solely because we're Black folks as well. So good question, though, Jannie.
Thank you. And I absolutely agree. Like, we're more than just being presidents. We're, at the end of the day, still Black folk trying to make it day in and day out, especially as students on this campus, and the struggles that we face. And so to kind of hop into a more general question, what do you all think was the most rewarding and challenging aspect of being a Black student body president here at a PWI? And I will start this question off with Brian.
Thank you. I think what is most rewarding, and what was certainly most rewarding for me, is all the opportunities I had to be in places and spaces where most students aren't, and to sort of be in meetings and in conversations where most students aren't. And so recognizing that as an opportunity to represent the full student body, and to make sure that perspectives of students of color and marginalized students are not erased in my representation of the full student body. So that was where the biggest opportunity was, in terms of the access that you have to university leadership and leadership in the city of Oxford. What was most challenging is sort of in the role, you have lots of different relationships to maintain, which was a great skill set in my career in terms of like stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management. And so in the role, I definitely felt I had a moral obligation to make sure that Black and Brown and other minority students are represented, and to do that authentically. While at the same time, I did not want to be perceived as having grievances or for always making things about race, and to damage my relationships with others. And so that was definitely a delicate balancing act. It was definitely a challenge in the role.
Well, if I can go next, I would just say that what I found most rewarding was seeing the Black students come out from the shadows and really become part of the whole Miami experience during my presidency. And I have to say, I would not have been elected had it not been for the indefatigable work of Randi Thomas. When his work with the Black Student Action Association, let me tell you, Randi found all kinds of people who I had no idea were part of the Miami family, got them out campaigning. And I'm not going to make it like we were all on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, but if there were 300 or 400 Black students on Miami's campus. Randi found every single one of them, made sure that they were working the campaign. Now, we all know he was doing it to set up his race, but the sense of camaraderie that we all developed, black kids on that campus can be like strangers in a strange land, and to be able to come together, and have some unity around anything is great.
Well, you'll be happy to know, President Cager, that President Perkins continued that tradition when he was student body president. I'm sure he'll speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my connection, but we're back. But but yeah, I would say the biggest reward, and I think Brian spoke to this a lot, was definitely the connections and the networking. Not only for myself as a student leader, but for our whole administration. My running mate Dante and I prided ourselves on just continuing the work that we had already started in our respective communities before we became student body president and vice president, and that was definitely amplified here. And I definitely pride myself on being able to strengthen our relationship as ASG, not only within ourselves but with other schools, student governments. So restoring those relationships between other schools, and I actually had the opportunity to travel to DC right before COVID to participate in the American Israel Public Affairs Committee's student retreat for Black students. So I got to not only meet with student body presidents that were just from Ohio, but student body presidents from HBCUs, student body presidents from other PWIs, and just being able to take their ideas and perspectives and bring them back to Miami was such an awesome thing. And then probably most challenging was trying to fit everything in 1 year, for sure. I would say that's probably definitely the hardest part for everybody, but knowing that you want to do so much, especially being at a PWI and being a Black student at a PWI, wanted to do everything for everyone, for marginalized groups, for the majority, for all types of groups on campus, and recognize that you only have a short amount of time. And then that got shortened for myself personally a little bit more with COVID and everything, so readjusting and still making sure that we're fulfilling our mission of representing our students and making sure our students remain informed, which I do think that we did a really good job of this past year.
Randi, would you like to also talk about the most rewarding and challenging things of your presidency?
I would say the most rewarding thing of my presidency was twofold. The first was, as President Cager talked about, the first appearance that he made with others before the Miami Board of Trustees on divestiture from South Africa didn't go extremely well, to say the least. To the meeting when we continued, Tom Watson was a student body president between John and I, and Tom was a fierce warrior. And between John and Tom, I think they wore the administration out. So I was able to come in and just be a nice person and just say, hey, we can either continue to do it the way John and Tom did, or we can make some progress and talk. And President Pearson, I'll never forget it when he brought me in his office and he said, if you can just get the students just to bring it down a little bit, I've got the board ready to move, but you guys keep getting them riled up. So he said, you got to trust me. And I did trust him, and he was right. And we both agreed, and we divested from South Africa, again, not because of me, but because of a long line of folks that were doing very, very good work. We worked together to get that accomplished and things of that nature. The other big one, Jannie, for me, as you know, is the student credit union. Mike Thomas, who was the student body president the year after me, was on my staff, and he had been engaged and involved in the divestiture and other things. And he came up with the idea and sat me down one day and said, hey, listen, we can do this. And then from there on, I was a believer, and he and I went out and put it together and sold it. And, it's in Armstrong still today. So he and Rachel Roberts, Jeff Carpenter, Jen Coldy, many others who I apologize for not saying your names, were involved. And it's nice when you can walk on campus and still, see something that you built that's still there and make that impact and things of that nature. So.
Absolutely. And it's really amazing to see what the power of students and what student-driven initiatives can do on this campus. And so going over to Jaylen to talk about student activism. Student activism has historically been hit or miss on Miami's campus. But in 2018, you and other members of the Black community reestablished the Black Action Movement, making it BAM 2.0. How did you transfer your work and drive from BAM 2.0 into your work as student body president?
For sure. I think, in a sense, I'm just a small slice of Miami's very strong history of activism and advocacy for not only students of color, but for issues that students are passionate about. And I feel like, that was easy in a sense to, transfer over to the role as student body president and working with the cabinet and working with the very strong Senate as well. I think that a lot of the things that we were advocating for were things that, people already wanted, but didn't necessarily know how to go about it. And so with this being one of the big drivers of me running for student body president, that initial meeting that, the small group of 8 of us had with President Crawford and his administration was a very courageous, meeting to call to let, administrators know, like, we want you here at this time, and we're going to, talk about this, that, and the third, give you a list of demands, and we're going to figure out how to best represent our Black students. But, also recognizing on their side, that we just took advantage of a very opportune time for Miami as it pertained to working with a president that, was very willing and open and honest with students and willing to listen to their perspectives. So that made it definitely a lot easier being able to at least have administration that you were able to, just generally approach for like a lot of the issues that, we talked about with former student body presidents and other people that, are trying to get administration's attention, is that, they feel like they were unreceptive to, what they were talking about. And I feel like that's never been the case with President Crawford. And so I feel like that just makes it a whole lot easier on, ASG's end, and feeling that, our administration is listening to our concerns and things like that. But there are a lot of transferable skills. Like I would say, for instance, just having the courage to, approach people that have been in these positions for so long and have their, like, saying, like, pretty much, these are my expectations. These are what we want to do. How do we get there? And then something as simple as the Freedom Summer of 64 initiative, knowing that we had to face 3 different committees and go through 3-4 different committees to figure out if this was something that was feasible, and then ultimately going in front of the Board of Trustees and just seeing all that pay off in the end, and then them, moving us up in the agenda and saying, we're unanimously moving this forward. It's just a very, a relieving moment for sure. So there are a lot of, like we pretty much talked about, there are a lot of transferable skills and, experiences that are already present on Miami's campus with activism and advocacy, but it's definitely a great opportunity to, amplify those passions.
Absolutely. And the work that you and the other separate members of BAM 2.0 have done is still seen to this day. I remember when I was a first year and I saw the protest in Armstrong, and I went to the protest in Armstrong, and seeing you all walk out of the CSDI, then ODA, was just breathtaking for me as a first year student. So your work is still seen to this day. And so to go over to the student advocacy side, I'm going to take this question goes to Brian. Student advocacy is at the core of ASG's mission. And during your administration, there was a university president change from President Garland to President Hodge. So how did you establish a relationship with the new President Hodge while ensuring that student voices and experiences were heard and valued in decision-making rooms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was definitely a time of a lot of opportunity, but also some nervousness with leadership turnover, because you're never quite sure in terms of what will change, what will stay the same. It was a great opportunity. My student body president year was the first year of Dr. Hodge's time as president. And so I really tried to think of ways to help influence his onboarding into the university. So thinking about times to have Dr. Hodge come to an ASG student senate meeting to take questions from students, and then also making sure that either myself and other members of ASG, whether they be cabinet members or senate members or other student leaders, are in a lot of this sort of the formal spaces that the university has set up for university governance. So the University Senate, the Student Affairs Council, and other sort of formal bodies that the university has set up, and that the president uses and the president's administration uses to inform their thinking. So making sure that there's plenty of student representation and that too. And then the third big opportunity was the university was thinking about building a new student union at the time, which is now the Student Armstrong, the Armstrong Center. And there was a committee that Dr. Hodge had put together. And so I got to be a part of that. And I got to help influence other students who got to be a part of that. So that was another space to sort of making sure that student voices were heard and could help influence the Dr. Hodge's thinking at that time.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that the core of everything we're seeing here is students, is seeing the power of students, is seeing how students can get involved and getting their voices heard. And so there are many people who are tuning into this webinar tonight. So what advice do you all have for Black, Indigenous students of color who want to take on leadership positions at Miami? And so I'm going to start off with our last student body president, Jaylen Perkins.
Of course, I would say first and foremost, just use what you have. There are so many ways to get involved with leadership roles. There are so many different avenues that you can take with leadership. Leadership is what you define it to be. Leadership can be seen as, joining your community leadership team in your residence hall, or applying to be an RA, or being an advocate for, dining halls and things like that. Recognize that you have a voice in, any aspect or any realm that you find yourself in at Miami. There's some way for you to get involved and represent, whether it be academically, whether it be socially, whether it be in Greek life, just pretty much finding your space and finding what works for you and allows you to amplify your voice the most. And then ultimately, as it pertains to, associated student government, knowing that, if you're not comfortable with, speaking up as much as possible, knowing that you have representation, knowing that every student has representation in ASG based off of where they live on or off campus, as well as what academic college they're in. So getting to know, or at least getting acclimated with who your senators are, knowing, and then taking it a little bit further if you want to go into something more specialized, figuring out where you can get involved with secretaries and ASG and their, committee initiatives as well. But overall, just go for it, be courageous, recognize that you're in your space for a reason, and that it's up to you to pretty much take that where you'd like to.
If I can chime in, I would just say for those Black students who are on campus, every closed door is not a locked door. Try every door handle, try and find your way. ASG may not be your thing, but there are opportunities for leadership in a number of different places on the campus and in the Miami family. And don't be afraid, be bold, continue to look for opportunities, and the opportunities will present themselves. But don't psych yourself out or talk yourself out of a chance to get involved.
John, that's so true. I know when we were working on getting students on the board of trustees, Miami's administration was the main administration of the public institutions in Ohio that was working to not make it happen. And our student government was the main student government of the public institutions working to make it happen. And I remember Bill Hanger, my predecessor, learned that I was going to be testifying before the Ohio Senate Education Committee. He called me in and he wanted to see what I was going to say. And I was like, okay, you're on the other side. Why do you want to see what I'm going to say? And Jaylen and Jannie, you've heard me tell the story before. And his basic point was, if you get up there and you don't do so well, and he used other terms than that, then I and Miami, we look bad. But if you get up there and you're great, and let's say you even win on this issue and Miami loses, Miami, we still win because we educated you well enough so that you can beat us. And so that's what I always try to do when I'm working with students, is to try to get them to understand that we want you all to be the best you that you want to be and that you can be. And so, as John said, I'd encourage you to talk to staff as well as you're checking those doors, because you could make a connection that you might not have ever thought possible. And those folks can sometimes be your biggest cheerleaders and your biggest coaches, even when they don't agree with where you are on an issue. And I think that's so important as we look at what's going on in the larger politics of today, whether you're on the Trump end or whether you're on the Biden end. We've got to start looking and talking to each other as citizens, as Americans. We can disagree on the issues, but the other side that disagrees with whatever side we're on isn't the enemy. They just have a different way of trying to accomplish what they think is best for the country. And I learned that here at Miami, and now that I'm here, that's what I try to put forward. And I learned that not only through administration and staff, but through people like President Cager and other students and things of that nature, and through students like President Perkins and President Kamara and President Alexander. When you all come through, President Perkins and I had some long conversations about that. I think I learned more from him during his presidency than he learned from me and things. And so I thank him for that and appreciate that. So, but yeah, so that's what I would say, Jannie.
And for me, I think about it, I guess my advice would be two-pronged. One, to be thinking about an interest that you have. It could be something that an interest or hobby or skill that you have or you want to develop. It could be something aligned to what you want to do professionally, or it could be just something personally that you have, and that could help sort of inform what opportunities are out there. And then a second way to think about it, which is similar to what Jaylen was talking about, was thinking about different sort of leadership and management opportunities that are out there to be on a team, lead a team, helping a team meet goals, complete projects. I always joke about how at work, all I do is do group projects and give presentations and write papers. And that's all I did in college, was write papers and give presentations and work on group projects. So, and that leadership experience is really helpful in job interviews to talk about when you had to manage conflict, or when you had to monitor or track a goal, or when you had to manage relationships with different stakeholders. And so that extracurricular experience at Miami can be really valuable in helping make you a competitive job applicant.
I just want to add one thing in here. I agree with all the sentiments here. And I want to also kind of go off of what John said. Leadership does not mean ASG, and that's coming from me as the president. I mean, I have been involved. I was involved in ASG for my first 2 years in Miami, and I took a step back my junior year to be the Diversity Affairs Council president. And even with my ASG experience those 2 years, I still was involved in a lot of other leadership experiences that made me known in other places around campus. I was a student athlete, and being a student athlete was like even a leadership role. So the smallest thing that you can do to kind of put yourself out there and to put out your values out there so that you can gain a following, gain a following of individuals who have similar interests, then you create a leader. You taking the initiative to make change makes you a leader. And so it doesn't mean that you have to join like a system of ASG or college Dems or any other student organization. It's just taking the initiative to step out of your comfort zone to make change. And like that can be you emailing the dean of students office and saying, hey, there's this issue in my residence hall and I want to fix it, or I want to do something. Can we work together? It's these simple things of just going out there and putting yourself out there to create change. And that is what makes a leader. And so that's what I wanted to add. So yeah.
Well, has been such a good discussion we have going forward, and I'm glad we just that Jane was able to chime in there to, the cement all what's been said there. I'm here to bring the audience questions, and we got one. So this person asked, what would be your one do-over, or that you would go back to as far as your purview from your administration when you were at Miami? And we can start with John Cager and go from there.
My one do-over from my administration, and really it's my one do-over from my time at Miami, is that I would keep better contact with the staff so that I could maintain a relationship with some of them after I left. My sister was class of 70, and she still talks to people who long retired from Miami. But when I got to the campus, people on the staff knew me because my sister maintained a relationship with her. I think of a couple of professors who were very influential in the stuff I've done post-Miami, Dr. Alice Fannin, S. Diane Bogus, some others, who there were times in my professional life, if I could have called them and had a catch-up conversation with them, I would have appreciated doing it, but I lost touch with them. So I would have kept touch with some of the Miami staff persons better.
Randy?
Well, I'll take it from a little different angle. I like to think of myself as an out-of-the-box thinker, but the one do-over was a time that I was stuck in the box, and that was every week this one student would come by and he'd say, I've got this idea. We really need to do this. And I'd listen to the idea, and I was politely rude. I'd listen, but I had no intention of doing anything. And I just didn't see the need for it. I didn't see the vision for it. And now every time that I walk on campus and I see a BCRTA, Butler County Rural Transportation Authority bus go by, I'm like, dang it, because his idea was to bring buses and to have them come through. And the next year, I believe Mike Thomas, who never was inside of any box, if you know Mike, and I say that very positively, that was one of the things that he put forward. And now from there, we have the BCRTA that students, get around on the bus and all those sorts of things. So that would have been the one thing, Seth, that I wish I would have been a little bit more open to thinking larger than I thought at the time.
Wonderful. Brian?
So for me, something I will never forget, something I wish I could do over, was a time when I didn't speak up and I should have. There was a time when there was a student organization funding request, and there was debate on whether or not it was aligned with the rules or not aligned with the rules. And my position was that it doesn't align with the rules, and I thought pretty clearly that it didn't. And knowing that I had to do my job and have that stance, one of the impacted student orgs put a proposal on the table with the student senate that could have likely resolved it all. And I was naively at the time thought that the student senate would accept it, but they didn't. And I should have spoke up in that moment, and I didn't. So yeah, from that, I take from that moment, I take the points of speaking up, even when it's risky, even when it's risky, because you don't want, further to the dangers of not speaking up can potentially cause more problems down the road.
Jaylen?
I was thinking pretty hard about this question, but I don't want to be cliche, but I don't think there's really anything that I would change, per se, or redo. I do think that one thing that, I'm sure that all of us can speak to is, just touching more people, reaching out to more people, talking to more organizations, making sure all our organizations are comfortable. But I'm pretty sure that no student body president that will come after this will be able to do so. But also, I would say ultimately just maintaining more of a good work-life balance. I think I was pretty good at that, but there's always improvements for that. Recognizing that you are in this very important position, but you're also more often than not in your senior year. So not allowing that to take too much from your senior year. And often found myself going out and talking about ASG while we're out on the Friday night or a Saturday afternoon, something like that. But so there's another sense of work-life balance. But ultimately, like I said, reaching out to more organizations, talking to more students, just getting that ASG name out there more and more, because there are so many of our students that either don't know about ASG or don't know the exact work that we do, and knowing that ASG literally touches anything that has to do with students in some way, shape, or form. So just pushing that out more.
Jannie, do you want to add to that?
I can try to answer this question. I'm going to say instead of a year, I'll say semester, because we're about to end the semester. I think one of my biggest things I want to change for next semester is to slow down. COVID propelled us into the semester because of us pushing back the start date, of us having to navigate how to bring students on campus. And so ever since May, my administration has been go, go, go. And so one of the things I want to do for next year is to just slow down and take a breath before we get into the semester, to figure out what are our core values so we can go back to them as we are navigating the semester. ASG is doing a lot of great work this semester, and I'm honestly so proud of us. A lot of my own personal dreams are coming through true, being presenting legislation in the University Senate and getting to do a lot of initiatives and policy work above our normal student government work. But I think for next year, it's taking a step back and slowing down and letting us breathe. So yeah.
All right, wonderful. And so one of the questions was that said, the university has made some strides to help improve race relations and things of that nature on campus. So what can the university do to further enhance race relations or the environment for students of color on campus? And we can probably start with Jannie or Jaylen and go from there.
I'll start with this one just to kind of go. So this is something that has been a very hot topic this semester, or just this year for our administration. We got, again, propelled into the Race Relations in America in June, and having to work with the task force before I and other students resigned, and everything along the line moving up to now. It's been an uphill battle. And so when it comes to students and diversity and equity and inclusion, the first thing you can do is ensuring that you are, from like an administrative side, allowing the CSDI to be there, to be that professional staff advocate for students. That's the biggest thing that a lot of students value, is seeing the CSDI be in these conversations, because they have a really close relationship with a lot of students here on campus. And the student side of that is letting your student leaders who work in this specific field be in these conversations and even lead and drive these conversations, because any initiative, any policy, any program that we change as university ultimately affects the student. And so letting the student drive and lead that conversation is very important to how we make progressive change here at Miami. And so that is my answer.
And to piggyback off of that, I think Jannie brought up a really good point about how this is a very pivotal point in history for race relations and how we, define ourselves and look at ourselves. I think that there's a lot of work to be done, not only on Miami's level, but Ohio's level, on Southwest Ohio's level, on our Midwestern regional level, and our country's level. There's so much systemic issues that are, plaguing our Black people and our students of color. And it greatly impacts our students of color at Miami, recognizing, Miami's place in that, recognizing how we can be advocates and activists for our students, how we can best represent our students regardless of, their backgrounds, places that they come from. And also, like Jannie was saying, recognizing your place as a student. It's administration and staff's roles to make sure they have students at the table from all backgrounds and walks of life, but also recognizing as students the powers that you have. And your Diversity Affair Council and your BSAAs and your Asian American associations, regardless of where, you find your community to be, there's always work to be done. There's always improvements to be had. And I think that's something that, we're all guilty of when it comes to recruitment, is, just focusing on the negatives in Miami. For, recognize that you'll also, as a student, when we speak on Miami, we need to speak on our, positive experiences just as much as the negatives, recognizing that, we're not the only universities with these issues. A lot of them are across the board as well, but, recognizing that, the power that we have, our bridges and our recruitment efforts and things like that, recognizing that really goes a far way in, getting to where we'd like to be as it pertains to, diversity, inclusion, and equity on campus.
I would say I have a couple of thoughts. One would be, especially in this moment, in these times, which in some ways are a lot different than when I was at Miami in the 2000s. But in this moment, in these times, for the university thinking about when there are incidents on campus, especially ones that are sort of more severe, to recognize that it can be really traumatic. I wish it was just offensive for Black students and students of color, but it can be traumatic for mental health and for psyche. And so I think it's important for leadership and for folks who are in positions of influence to recognize that and to not be harder on the response than the perpetrator. So if I were Jaylen and Jannie in these times, that's definitely something I would be pushing the university to do if I was in the role again. And then more generally, easier said than done, but anything that can be done to sort of help students across difference get to know each other, interact with each other, whether it be different events, student orgs, and there's different residence hall themes, university events, campus events, and student leaders, different student leadership positions can really help sort of facilitate that as well. So I definitely think, opportunities for students to get to know each other across lines of difference, especially for international students and students who are born and raised in the U.S. is really important too.
Randy, then John.
Mr. President, you want to go?
Racism is a function of two things: economics and familiarity. Miami can't do anything about the economics, but in terms of familiarity, most of you can relate to being the first Black person that some Miami student ever met. When I was an undergrad, the most excitement you ever saw on campus was those 2 weeks before school started. If a Black girl was on campus early, everybody, all the white kids were scared that she was going to integrate rush, and it was just, and that comes from people not understanding that Black people and white people are basically the same people, except for 1 or 2% of life experiences. And if you want to make things more, if you want to deal with the reality of race relationships, you got to get people to look at people as people, not Black people and white people. And the only way that can happen in the Miami Crucible is to get more Black people in the mix. I don't know if you just go and kidnap them, steal them from Central State or whatever, but you need a larger Black mix in that formula to overcome the lack of familiarity.
He's always been able to say it more clear and more concise than I could say it. That's why I wanted him to go first. And I'll just echo his thoughts and the thoughts, I think, of what everyone else has said. We have to support ourselves. We have to have an environment where it's understood that we're welcome. But that's not enough. After that, it's familiarity. As I believe it's Michelle Obama says, it's hard to hate up close. And so how do we, and I'm not saying we as in Black students or students of color, but how do we, Miami, as a community, bring groups together that don't normally necessarily go together, if you will. And that's where it's got to be. Because until majority students see and feel and begin to, and I think it's happening, begin to understand that they're a part of it and that they should be engaged and involved in this process, I think we won't make as much progress as we can make if we do that. Now, how we do that is challenging. The thing that I like about Miami is that there's a lot of people and students and others that are moving around and doing that, and not necessarily being celebrated. It's just who they are and what they do and things of that nature. So in our office, for example, we have students from all different sorts of student groups. We have a very large contingency of college Republicans, a very large contingency of college Democrats, a very large contingency of this and that normally you wouldn't necessarily see us coming together. But we try to get people to understand that if you're going to try to convince someone that the way you think it should be is right, the only way to do that is to understand where they're coming from, so you can explain your position through their eyes, not through your eyes, because otherwise we'll just continue to throw our own talking points up over the fence, and that's not going to make any progress. So that's what we try to do, at least in the Government Relations Network. And we've had great people like the two, Jaylen, the former student body president, and Jannie, the current student body president, that have been a part of that process. And we've had folks from all over, a lot of different ideas and things. Caleb Stidham, Noah Johnson, Amanda and Angela Sargent, and I know I'm going to forget people, Nicole Hoyer, Allison Lawler, the governor, of course, everybody knows the governor, Cameron Garcick, and just many, 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 many more who have, I almost said Colin Powell. We didn't have Colin Powell, but we did have Colin Finn. We do have Colin Finn, and Lauren Poitras, Joe Trevette, and I could sit here all night and go through the names. And Jannie and Jaylen, you know a lot of these folks already that really put themselves out and expose themselves so that others can learn where they're coming from. And if we're going to make change and have the Miami culture that we want to have, we need to have more folks like that, I think, that are involved. So.
First, we'll do 2 questions. We'll finish. This is the first one. So, starting with John, what is your favorite memory as ASG student body president?
My favorite memory as student body president was a group of us were protesting for the University divest from South Africa, and we had a candlelight vigil. And we sang some songs, had the vigil. And then as we left, the police showed up and made us go back and scrape up all of the candle droppings off of the ground.
Randy, were you part of that?
I somehow wasn't around for the scraping part, but I was around for the other part. This is the first I've heard about that. I guess I left a little too early. I would say really what I talked about before, the divestiture from South Africa and the students on the board of trustees, because those were issues that student government had worked on for multiple years. And both of them were not just at Miami, but they were at other public universities and some private across Ohio at the time. And so when those were accomplished, it was really a feeling of fulfillment, having seen it for 4 years go through. And then I would say the next ones were every time a student of color was elected student body president, and I had the opportunity to be here. That always fills me with joy. And Jannie being the first African American and female was because we've had female presidents, and we've had some really great female presidents before. Not as many as we need to have though, but that was really cool. Some say that perhaps it was Jannie who inspired our current vice president elect. I don't know. I'm just that might be a little bit of a stretch, I guess, right, Jannie? But
all right.
I'll take it, Randy. I'll take it.
Brian?
A favorite memory I have is many, but the first one that came to mind is the new Goggin Ice Center opened. Well, it's not new anymore, but at the time it was new. In 2006, 2007, it was its first year. And so not only getting to see the old center get demolished and going to the last game there, being in the first game in the new arena and being able to go on the ice with a group of students and other special guests at the first game at the new arena was just a really special moment in Miami hockey history.
Jaylen?
I would say, like we talked about a little bit before, definitely being able to work with Brandon Small, who is still the current diversity and inclusion secretary for ASG, who is also my secretary for diversity and inclusion, and work with him and his committee on Freedom Summer, preserving our history a little bit more on campus. And just that whole, like I talked a little bit about before, there was a whole process that went into that. Still, in part of the process right now, but just pretty much seeing that come to fruition and recognizing, for me that this is like part of this is why we do what we do. For little things like this, being able to do, what we can with what we have is definitely something that's very rewarding. So I would definitely say that was my favorite memory of ASG.
And Jannie, do you have any favorite memories from your?
I can talk about some things that have made me really happy these past couple of months. Or one thing in particular. So one of my biggest goals coming into this year was to present something to University Senate that was led by students. And we got to do that. It was, I believe, a month ago, we went to University Senate to talk about reforming attendance policies across campus. And so getting to see my Secretary of Academic Affairs, Ruku Paul, go onto the Senate floor and talk about that piece of legislation, and having all 11 student senators be present, and having individuals like me and others speak about why it's so important for us to create attendance policies that are accessible to everyone, especially in a pandemic world, was something amazing. And seeing it pass made me even happier. We were all in the office, me and a couple of our students, while this was all happening. We were all on Zoom, and we were all just like looking at each other's screens, trying to like make sure this actually gets passed. So we were in the chat of University Senate, making sure that we are answering questions and everything along those lines. And so it's really amazing to see what putting a dream and putting a goal out there and working towards it can do. And now there's currently an ad hoc committee being made across campus, where we're working with different university partners to research into attendance policies across the nation to ensure that we are creating attendance policies that, again, are accessible for students and support the student experience in the academic realm. So that's my favorite memory so far. Hopefully there are a bunch more. We are only halfway through the year, and so we'll see.
Wonderful, wonderful. This will be the last one. I think Brian talked about it a little bit, but what about your experience at ASG has personally impacted in your current career or anything that you're doing personally? Anybody can go from the start.
I would say all the just incredible people that I had an opportunity to work with. And this spans really from President Cager's time to Mike Thomas's time, the president after me. But gosh, Jeff Birding, Maxine Miles, Howard Siegel, Kim Krasinski, Julie Sedlock, Carolyn Jones, now Carolyn Craig. I mean, they just did, like Jannie said, just some incredible things. 24-hour library service. That wasn't the case. We have the dining, the point card. It used to be you paid for 3 meals a day, and that's what you got. And working with them, many of those folks were the ones that introduced the idea of, well, why can't we have different sorts of meal plans? Co-ed halls. When John and I were here, President Cager and I were here, there were very few co-ed halls, and they were only co-ed because the admissions numbers just happened that way. And so, we used to have something called visitation, and the hours were a lot different than they are now. Maxine Miles, to my memory, was the original person that came up with Bridges, right? The university runs that now. That was a student government initiative. The buses, the bringing the students in, all those sorts of things. Howard Siegel was Vice President Minority Affairs, same sort of thing. So I could go on. Jeff Birding, Executive Vice President and things. Jane Tobler, Communications, and I'm leaving people off, and I apologize to them, but we've had just a wealth of folks that have come in and really been engaged and involved in student government and across campus, and just working with them and learning from them and how they get things done has just been wonderful.
I can think of a couple of things. One is throughout my career, I've had to resolve a lot of conflict. I have had to do a lot of persuading of others through storytelling, through giving presentation, in my current role as a fundraiser. And definitely that was a skill that I started during my time in ASG and as ASG president, with, again, working with many different relationships, persuading others to sort of get a particular project over the finish line. And so that is really helped me. And anytime I've led a team or been on a team, I'm always thinking back to my days in ASG. And then also professionally, I've been in roles where I have had to help think around hiring and recruiting. And I always think about in ASG, I had a very diverse cabinet. Some of it was by chance, but others of it was, so I sort of did recruiting to help make it that way. And so I had a number of women, a number of people of color, including Black and brown students. And so professionally, when I'm in roles where I can help my organization think about how do you recruit a diverse applicant pool so that the best people who get selected are also from different backgrounds themselves. And so that skill set that I helped started sort of percolating in me in ASG is something that carries me to this day.
I have to say the one thing that I learned from my time as ASG president that has sustained, and in my campaigning for ASG president, I was introduced to something that I did not know existed on the Miami campus, which in 1985 was called the Gay and Lesbian Club. And I did not, I mean, I'm a Black Baptist kid from the east side of Cleveland, didn't know that existed. And my faith changed. My outlook and understanding of the LGBTQ, et cetera, community has changed. And even though I'm in a denomination that is not open and affirming, I became open and affirming and believing in the wholeness of all people, regardless of or who they love, because of experience on the Miami University campus.
Yeah, going off of that, just like a little bit of what everybody had been saying, like taking a little bit about from everyone had been saying, like Miami and ASG have definitely prepared me for, networking more and being very resourceful, recognizing, what we have access to right now, especially during these times. These times are definitely forcing me to become resourceful and put those Miami experiences to use. But also I feel myself, being very convicted at times to, do a little bit more. Like, for example, in my program at Cornell, my MPH program, we just had a anti-racism, anti-discrimination town hall. And so I actually had the opportunity to, volunteering my time and efforts into, preparing that and participating in that, leading, facilitating small groups and some of that discussion because, I felt some sort of conviction and some sort of obligation to, educate where I can and help out where I can and share my experiences. And, like President Cager was saying, being open and honest about experiences and open and honest to and understanding to other people's experiences. And I think those are all different skill sets to have that, ASG in Miami has definitely equipped me with.
For me, I'm going to talk about like my experience in general through ASG because I'm still going through this role of presidency. My experience at ASG has really brought me to love higher education. It's really taught me to love higher education and particularly working in this field. And so in addition to the other leadership opportunities I've been a part of at Miami, I really want to go into student affairs and higher education because of this work in student advocacy and being able to support the next generation of leaders and to support the next generation of individuals going out to our workforce. Because I think that college is such an important and such a privilege for so many people to go to. Like, I'm a first generation college student. My parents do not understand what I do, but they are so proud of me. And I want that for other students. I want students to find their way through college and to find their purpose, their passion, and their core in order for them to be confident, comfortable, connected, and curious here in college. And so I am very grateful for my experience in the ASG and the skills they've taught me around networking, around communication at the very basic. And so I love this body. I will always stand this body forever. I could ever talk about ASG for years. And so this experience will stay with me forever. And I am honestly happy to go into the field of student affairs and higher education because of this role and because of my work in ASG. So.
And Seth,
Wow.
there are a lot of folks like that with Jannie, and I'd be remiss, and I apologize, but I have to take a moment just to say this. But my current chief staff, Brianna Porter, and her staff, her support staff, Sydney Jefferson and Olivia Kelly, as you know, did the GRIP program, and they just that's Government Relations Immersion Program, and they've just been, as Jannie said, and as Jaylen said, and Brian and President Cager, they fall within that group, and so they just have been immensely helpful. So as I tell people, sometimes I forget I'm not a student activist in ASG, and people have to say, "No, you're the administration now, Randy," and I'm like, "No, I'm still a student activist." So they help me maintain my student activist card. So thank you to them.
All right, that's a good shout out to those young ladies. It was good to meet them virtually a few weeks ago. So we thank Jannie for moderating this discussion. I think we all enjoyed it today, so we thank you. We thank all the panelists, all of our esteemed alumni, Jaylen, Brian, Randy, and John, just to provide us the history and context of what it was meant to be a Black student body president at a PWI. So we thank you for joining us today. So below you'll be able to find, or you can watch our upcoming Alumni Association webinars. Those are previous recordings. So this will be recording. You can watch this. So we have a lot of great content out there that you can go back and watch. We thank all the audience who submitted questions, and thank you again for joining us. And love and honor, and take care, everyone.